There's a different one for the Wi-Fi.
Let's see, who else have we got? I guess we can get started now.
We need to get the town clerk or somebody to.
Well, you might get you might. And I would like to advise that this meeting is being broadcast live by Chelmsford Telemedia and also recorded for later broadcast. I'll ask at this time if there are any media present and if they would please identify themselves and let us know what their activity will be during the meeting.
Alana Melanson, Lowell Sun. I will be doing audio recording and some short video clips.
Okay. Alana Melanson from the Lowell Sun is with us, and she'll be doing some audio recording and video clips during the meeting in addition to preparing for her Lowell Sun correspondence activity. Anybody else? Don't see any other media? Okay. Very good. I'd like at this time to move to open session, which we usually do right after we start the meeting. And this evening, we do have some town officials with us who I expect will present their opinions on certain sections of the charter. I would like to start, however, with Honorina Maloney, our town clerk. She has something that she would like to address, and I think this will be rather brief, and I don't want to keep you any longer than we have to, so why don't you go first?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you for having me this evening. The only suggestion that I have is that we consider adding some language to the charter, and that is to have a minimum of 5 write-in votes for write-ins. As you know, right now, someone can get in with 1 vote, especially with town meeting representatives. So that is my suggestion, and if we look at the charter, perhaps we could include some language in section 2.4 under election, that's for town meeting membership, and then repeat the same language on under section 2. Actually, I believe that would be right when we begin the section 3-2 Board of Selectmen, right under there. So basically, we would be adding D. So following, I'm looking at the charter here. I believe it's, I just printed this from the website. So following vacancies in office, any vacancy in any elective office shall be filled in the manner provided by General Law, Chapter 41. Right underneath that, perhaps we can put D and insert some language so that write-in candidates shall receive a minimum of 5 write-in votes.
You're on section 3.2 now, is that what you're?
Yeah, she's proposing
Yes, I
subsection
started.
D.
I started with section 2-3, town meeting membership.
It's actually 3.1. Yeah.
And then I may have lost a page here, I
sorry.
apologize.
Okay,
So,
3.1, I'm with you.
3.1 subsection
Okay.
D right after this.
so, right, 3-1, correct. So that is my suggestion. As you know, the past few years, we've had quite a difficult time attracting candidates for, especially for town meeting. And this past election was no exception. So it is my hope that if we consider this, is that it brings a little bit more honor to the office of, especially for town meeting representatives. So it's just something for the committee to consider.
Now, is there anything magic about the number 5? Why not 6?
It's-
Why not 10?
Thank you. It is basically consistent with how the state conducts itself
Okay.
with write-ins. So it's in alignment with that.
Okay. Very good. Anybody on the committee have any questions of the town clerk?
I just
just have a comment?
Go ahead.
I really like the way you use the word honor, because it really is an honor to serve.
It is indeed. Thank you for that, Ms. Bichette. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We kicked around some time ago the methodology to get more people to become members, like, other than what you suggested. And one of the thoughts was to have existing members go out and get another 25 signatures. What if we didn't require people to get 25 signatures? What if only they had to fill out a form or send you a letter or whatever to get on the ballot? To make it as simple as possible. Because the more difficult we make it, the less numbers we seem to get.
I understand.
Could we do that?
That is something worth looking into. Absolutely.
To your knowledge, there's nothing in state law that would prohibit
I
us
would
from-
have to look into that,
Okay.
Chairman Chase. However, at the same time, representatives should make themselves available and should make themselves known to their constituents.
I don't disagree with that.
But I understand your point, Mr. Burke, absolutely. Mhm.
I've been doing this for some years before when it first started. And then recently, the last 3 or 4 years, I've got a grand total of 1 phone call from a constituent, if you will.
I understand. Unfortunately, I have heard that from others as well.
And, you know, I'm in the book. I have email. You know, I'm in the system. Nobody
That
calls.
is why I respect this process that you folks have been doing for quite some time to review the charter and look at these possible changes. And absolutely, I would be more than happy to work with you and look into what we can do.
The other issue I've been hung up on is, like this past town meeting. How many people voted?
Town meeting or town election, Mr. Burke?
Town meeting.
Town meeting.
If you get 122,
Oh, okay.
you get a lot
Yes?
out of 162 or 130. But there's 30 to 40 empty votes.
Empty chairs.
And are they empty chairs? Are the people there? Are they not there? You can tell better than I whether or not a large number of people don't show up.
A lot of them don't.
And there's a lot that don't.
A lot of them also just don't vote, and they're there.
But yes, that's true too.
Don't understand that.
And, you know, because we talked about, again, early on, we talked about the number. Should we have more town meeting reps? Should we have less? We can't get what we are signed up for. How are we going to get more?
My suggestion, if you were to ask me, I would advise 15 if you were considering a lower number as opposed to more.
And from what you said tonight, I'd even be agreeable to 5, you know.
Well, don't know if we can do that. But again, we can certainly work together to hopefully make it easier for folks to get more engagement. I don't think there is a magic formula, really.
We've gone through the charter, a first pass, just a preliminary pass to familiarize ourselves with all the sections, and of course we've had discussion. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is, now that we've gone through everything and we're winding up our input on and complete discussion, we'll go back through the charter, and everybody will have an opportunity to revisit those sections. And, you know, if that's something that is of interest to the committee, certainly we'll talk about it. Just because we've gone through once and we've said, well, we really don't want to change anything, we're still a little bit too early in the process. We haven't taken any votes.
Right.
Okay, so we can still revisit
Of course.
sections as we go through. So if you could, you know, give us that information that we talked about earlier, that would help us.
So again, you are considering having interested citizens who run for town meeting representatives not to require getting signatures on nomination papers. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
a question, Ms. Town Clerk. On the issue of write-in, is how exact or explicit do the write-in names have to be? Can a write-in for Doug Bruce and a write-in for Douglas Bruce be counted as one candidate or two separate candidates?
Thank you for that, and that is why I do the outreach that I do, especially on the Facebook page. I do ask in advance when we find ourselves with vacant seats. I do the outreach and ask for individuals who are willing to do write-ins. And that's why I ask them, please email me, let me know variations of your name. So in your case, even if somebody writes D. Bruce, we would count that because we know that in advance.
Okay.
That is why it's so important. Obviously, we want people to pull nomination papers, but in the event of write-ins, and it's worked very well. Many individuals did get in touch with me. Unfortunately, with Precinct 6 and Precinct 8, nobody did, so that was difficult. So we did have a lot of the onesies and twosies and threesies, and it gets to be quite cumbersome because we don't know a lot of these individuals. We don't know how to get in touch with them. So again, in advance, when we know therefore we know the intent of the voter, and we do count because.
So let you know what all the aliases are?
Well, yes, yes, because it happens, and
Yeah.
we count those votes, absolutely.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
That is really going above and beyond the call of duty. I commend you for that, really.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a quick question. Are there open seats at town meeting remaining after the election?
No, we filled all the seats.
Good.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good
Appreciate-
evening, and thank
appreciate
you for your work.
coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
you.
Anyone else at this time who wishes to give public input that, and I will open this now to people who are not scheduled.
Good evening. Pat Wojcik. I guess I'm here representing, well, not representing, I'm here as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I don't want to make any erroneous assumptions that I might be representing anybody else on the board. You did ask two specific sections of the charter for our feedback, so I just want to speak briefly about those two sections. The first one being Section 4-7, the removal of the town manager. I think there's been some discussion about whether that should remain as it is with 4 votes out of 5 to terminate the town manager, or reduce that to 3 of 5. My feeling is that it works well at 4 of 5. I think somebody coming in as a town manager would have more confidence that they wouldn't be subject to political events that happen in town if they knew that it would require 4 votes to terminate them. There's other boards in town that deal with issues that I don't think are as serious as the hiring and firing of the town manager. For example, the ZBA issues special permits for home occupations and variances for house lots that might be missing, it might have 148 feet of frontage instead of the 150. Those require 4 of 5 votes in order to pass ZBA to get their variance or their special permit. I truly don't think a decision as critical as firing the town manager should be any less. So again, I feel like that section of the charter works well. The other one that you had asked about was Section 6-1, the annual budget policy. It mentions the Board of Selectmen and School Committee to get together to discuss the budget. As has been noted, that isn't often done on a formal basis. So I don't know that it really should remain in a charter as is. I think on a case-by-case basis, maybe that might happen. Probably it's more appropriate for the superintendent and town manager to get together and get their numbers together. And as it happens now, is the town manager basically provides the number that the school department generally will use. Obviously, the school department can advocate for more, and town meeting is the final arbiter on what happens there. Something a little bit kind of related to that, but not really, that you may or may not have discussed, is the actual warrant for town meeting. You're probably aware that the warrant for town meeting and the town election are combined. And I don't really know the reason for that, other than back in the old days, it used to be that the first order of business for town meeting was to elect all the officials in town, the selectmen and moderator and town clerk and everybody else. Obviously, we don't do that anymore, but we still have that one warrant which combines those two events. And because of that, the Board of Selectmen has to sign the warrant for town meeting effectively 4 weeks earlier than they otherwise would. So I think that kind of really moves the timeline way back, much more than it probably should. So I would suggest that you consider separating out those warrants, one for the election and one for the actual town meeting. And I'm not saying that just because I think the constable needs more work to do, but that's his problem. So those are my suggestions, if you have any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Wojcik?
I have some comments and questions about the whole 6-1 policy, but I don't know if this is the time to ask.
Does any of it relate to what Ms. Wojcik had to say? Just,
Yes.
okay, why don't you focus on just that part then? And then you can expand your discussion when other people get up or when we have our discussion.
Okay. Basically, I see that section 6-1, I see it in two different sections, two different parts. The first is the timeline of the budget process. And the questions I have about that is, do the committees meet as the charter indicates? And I think you addressed that. So possibly the answer to that is no, and possibly we should change that somehow.
Yeah, I don't think it should be mandated. I think if it is necessary, it does happen. Tri-board meetings, in my experience, especially recent experience, except for the last one that we had just days before town meeting, generally the information that you get at a tri-board meeting is something that's already been distributed by the town manager, by the superintendent, or by the town accountant, by the treasurer possibly. So I feel like there's very little new information at a tri-board meeting. I know a tri-board meeting is not specified although it could be implied, I guess, in the policy that's listed here. So I guess I don't feel like it should be a requirement if there is a situation where it does make sense to do those types of meetings. Then obviously I think each board would realize that and call such a meeting.
So are you saying that you don't think it's imperative that a tri-board meeting be called at the end of January?
That's correct. That's what I'm saying, yes.
The next question is, in regard to the state approvals, the governor's budget, the House budget, does that create a comfortable budget timeline for the town? I don't think so, and is there any way that we can change that?
Well, I don't think there's much we can do on the state level. We're always advocating to get our information as soon as possible, and probably the town manager will be able to talk better about those timelines. He follows those a lot more closely than I do, and could tell you more what he needs in order to create an accurate budget for presentation to town meeting. But I mean, that's another consideration too on possibly timing of town meeting. There have been times when, because of state procrastination or whatever you want to call it, it would have made sense maybe to have our town meeting later in the year than what we actually do.
Thank you. My next question would be, is the budget process too condensed? I think we're speaking about that now. And is it too condensed to be studied effectively by the Board of Selectmen, by the Finance Committee, to give recommendations to the Board of Selectmen before they vote on the warrant articles, and also the school department, the school committee? And if it is too condensed, what are the consequences? I think there are great consequences to that. And then my next question along with this is, should we have a town meeting in April? Because of this.
Right, and I think this year, we did have estimates for what the numbers would be probably early enough that I don't feel like it was too condensed. as I said, there have been times when it has been. Again, it's almost on a case-by-case basis, and maybe that is where you want to have some flexibility as to when town meeting would be called. So it isn't always the last Monday in April.
So what is the latest that is comfortable for the town manager for setting a budget at that time of the year to hold a spring town meeting?
I think you could probably ask the town manager that question. I don't want to speak for him.
Okay.
But, I mean, obviously, we want to be able to get a budget in place before the time comes.
Sure.
Before July 1st. I can't imagine we would ever be in June when we'd be doing the budget, but obviously, we wouldn't want to do that.
Those are my questions about the first part that I kind of split this into. The second is basically one long question. Is the approved balanced budget by April town meeting an absolute annual budget? Does the budget process continue through October town meeting? If the process actually does continue through October town meeting, why is the perception of many people that a balanced budget needs to be voted in April?
I think that's a rhetorical question, which I don't know that I can answer.
Okay, well, that's a question, because I think that the state does not approve our budget until
Correct.
after the October town meeting.
Yep.
So why do we have to have an absolute budget in April, where it might be easier and it might be more fluid? And I don't know if this is because the way things are now compared to 20 years ago, but we have to vote additional items at October town meeting. And I don't understand personally, and I've seen it become very conflicting, that things have to be absolute in April, whereas my question is, do they really have to be absolute?
Well, I think they're not absolute. I mean, we almost always have adjustments that we make in April and even, in October and then even in the following April. But I think it is important to have a fairly firm budget when the fiscal year begins. So everybody knows what numbers they're working with. I think you do have to have that.
That's true, but I think the perception of many people is that this is it. We can't go beyond that number. And in the real world, I don't think it really works that
Yeah,
way.
and I don't know that there's much we can do about perceptions.
Well, I think there is. but
Okay.
those are
Okay,
my
why don't
questions.
we,
Thank you.
okay, that's fine, and appreciate the comment. You might want to ask the town manager to comment on that when he speaks. Is there anything else? All set?
So I have.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you
Okay.
very much, appreciate the input.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Souza.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. John Souza, 88 Carlisle Street. Speaking as a resident, by way of full disclosure, I serve as the town finance director. I've been reading in the press some of the questions that some of the proposed amendments that the committee is considering. I wanted to offer my thoughts to the committee on a couple of them. The first one being the issue of the number of the vote level that's required to remove the town manager. Just to give a little history on myself, I first became involved in town government before I worked for the town. I ran, back in 1989 was the year that the charter was adopted. I ran as a town meeting representative that year in my early 20s and was elected. Served for a number of years as town meeting representative. Thinking back to when the charter was adopted at that time, there was a committee of people that worked very hard to craft the charter, and they didn't always agree on everything, as you know. I know you've studied some of the history of that. I think if you go back and look at it, the committee wrestled with the idea of the level of votes, but the thing I would like to impress upon the committee is, in my opinion, the 4 out of 5 number, the supermajority, so-called, the committee at that time just didn't pull that out of the air. They wrestled long and hard with it, and the reason being that I think they recognized that Chelmsford had grown by the late 80s to be a very large community. It was basically like running a small business or medium-sized business. And they recognized that you have to have professional management to do that. One of the ways you do that is you by the supermajority, you have a level of it provides a town manager with a level of support, knowing that when you sit in that chair, you have to make tough decisions every day. And when you do that, you're bound to anger someone. And I think the original Charter Commission felt that if you require a supermajority, what you're doing is you're giving that town manager, whoever he or she is, some insulation or some latitude so that they can make the tough decisions and not be worried about. What you're doing is you're allowing them to think long-term in the best long-term interests of the town, not what's going to happen to me in the next election cycle, or what's going to happen to me next year, or what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years when my contract's up. I think to have a professional manager, that's what you have to have, is that type of level of support. I think in my lifetime, I've witnessed at least 2 or 3 times. I think it's very easy, and I don't want the selectmen, I know we have a few selectmen in the audience, I mean no disrespect to them. I think they're honorable people. They do a great job. They're not paid. They volunteer. But in my lifetime, I've seen 2 or 3 times where it's very easy for a selectman, and I'm not talking about anybody in the room, to be elected. And they can quite easily elect 2 of their friends or people that think politically like them, and it would be very easy to remove the manager. So I just want to give the committee some pause. I think if you look around, I'm not going to name the suburbs, but there are a couple of suburbs that touch Chelmsford, and if you look back in the history, they have churned and burned through town managers, multiple ones within the matter of just 5-10 years. I think when you look at Chelmsford, it speaks to the integrity of the charter that since 1989 we've only had 2 town managers. So that's my thoughts on that proposed change. Thank you for your consideration.
Do you have anything else, or, because I'd like to give the committee an opportunity to ask you some questions on what you just said,
Yep,
because you're
that's-
talking about a specific section of the charter.
Sure, that's fine.
Anyone? Okay,
I have questions for the presenter about a different subject,
all right, okay. Do you, would you like to hear?
budgeting subject.
Okay, are you going to make more comments on another subject, or?
I wasn't planning to unless
Okay.
committee members had questions
Well,
on
we'll
something,
give
but I'm
the-
glad to answer any.
If you'll indulge us, we'll
Sure.
give the committee a little latitude, since, we've got a crack at you now. If
Sure.
we have a question, go right ahead.
Mr. Souza, question for you regarding the budget process and the timing of the budget process. One of the things that's been kicked around is the timing of town meeting. If town meeting were pushed back by some weeks, on the back, how far could that be pushed back before it would adversely impact the town's ability to deliver a budget before the beginning of the fiscal year?
My personal opinion is that I think the timeline we have now works well. And just to explain to everyone else, just to explain the budget process really starts, it's a continual process, but for the new year coming, it basically starts in October. Late September, I'm preparing the documents along with the town manager. We send out requests and budget materials and instructions to all the department heads, and those are out by the end of late September, October 1st at the earliest. They're due back at the end of October, along with capital requests. We then have time to review those requests with department heads in detail, after we go over them, of course. And by January, by late December, January, the town manager and I have usually, I would say late December, first week of January or so, the town manager and I have usually met with each department head one-on-one and gone over their request in detail, usually line by line. If they have any concerns or if there's an issue that they want to talk about, we discuss it at that time. Then, as you know, the town manager delivers his recommendation in late January, which coincides with the period of time when the governor delivers his budget, and we have the state aid numbers proposed by the governor. So we have initial state aid numbers. Now, as we all know, the governor's numbers are usually sometimes different from the House and then the Senate, but I think the governor or the House 1 numbers are always a good jumping off point. They don't change all that much. And then I think by that time, we usually know our retirement assessment in the late fall, depending on the valuation cycle of Middlesex. Early winter, we know our health insurance. So I'm trying to just give you a picture of these are the big numbers. There are smaller numbers that are going to change, but the big picture numbers, we usually know our debt service projection. So when you put all these things together, We know we can make estimates to how much new revenue the town's gonna take in total. So the town manager and I can pretty much come very close to knowing how much we have to work with in that time. So by late January, it's not that cumbersome. It can be difficult in some years, but it's not that cumbersome, in my opinion, for us to deliver a budget. And I think last January, if you remember, we had the joint meeting between Board of Selectmen, FinCom, School Committee, and the town manager shared his projections at that time. We had a very lengthy presentation. And then from there, we work to refine the budget as things come in, if any new news comes in. And by, I would say, mid-March, we're actively preparing the budget document that you see, the spiral-bound book. That has to be delivered to the printer before early April. I mean, it's pretty much in that point, unless something catastrophic would have happened, it's pretty much set at that point. In my opinion, I think the timeline with town meeting works well. I think if you push it back, what you do is you set yourself up for a problem, because if for some reason, if something's not approved or we have a problem, you're that much closer to the end of the fiscal year, and we have to have a budget in place by July 1 to start the year, so.
So then, just to summarize your feeling about the budgeting process and the timing around that process, is it's pretty good the way it is?
I think it works well. We can always, the earlier budgets come into us, the better. But it's, we pretty much know the main numbers that drive the budget, usually early on.
Okay.
Health insurance is probably the later piece, but.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Souza, do you feel it's enough time for the other committees to get a really good hold on the numbers, like the Finance Committee? Would they have enough time to interview departments and then address any other issues that might come up during that time? I feel that it's too condensed, and that's why I just think that a longer period of a budget cycle, all of a sudden the budget arrives, and I think that it's not enough time for people to go through the numbers effectively, for the Finance Committee to talk with the Board of Selectmen so that they can give their final approval, and also to get together with the School Committee. And at a tri-meeting, to me, it just sounds like it's very, very informative. But so far as decision-making, that happens in the individual committees. Do you feel that there should be more of a culmination of all of the committees to speak about the budget, and do you think we have enough time to do that?
I think what we do, I can say, I think part of the reason we probably may have had fewer meetings this year is the numbers were pretty close. And we didn't have, if we had $1 million deficit that we were trying to close, and I think back to the recessionary years, 08, 9, 10, post-recession years, we had more meetings because we had a huge problem we were trying to fix. So we needed to get the FinCom together, Board of Selectmen, School Committee certainly, because we have to remember the schools are the largest share of the town budget. So certainly we can't just make these decisions without involving school officials and the School Committee. I think the budget, when it comes out in late January, the Finance Committee usually starts holding hearings right away. I think one of the problems this year was that they didn't have the school budget. And I can be, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the school budget did not arrive that soon, and so the FinCom was delaying acting on it. But all the other budgets, I'm quite sure they had a chance to review.
Do you feel that people should be more lenient so far as the budget, it actually lasts until October? Because the final budget is not stamped until that time. Why do people feel that the April town meeting, it has to be set in stone that this is the budget and it shouldn't change that much?
From my perspective, I was listening to the discussion when I was in the audience. I think it's good or better financial planning to have a set budget at the April town meeting, because you know what your spending plan is going to be July 1st. The problem, if we wait till October, and I know what you're saying, We do make adjustments on the tax rate recap for certain things, whether it's state aid or the overlay or different accounts. But the problem, if you had a year where you had revenue problems or an unexpected expense, and you wait till October to set the budget, mid to late October, you've set yourself up for a problem because you've lost July, August, September, October. You now only have a part of a fiscal year to correct the problem. So if you did have to have, and I hope it would never happen, layoffs, you have to now make more substantial cuts because you only have, depending on the timeline, 6, 7, 8 months left to save the amount of money that you need.
But the numbers at the April town meeting that are voted for the budget for the year, and I understand what you're saying in this regard, but the numbers do change, but many people don't think that they should change. And is there any way that you could see that could be written into the charter so that it would help people understand that these numbers may change if necessary?
And I think a budget it's basically a spending plan, and plans sometimes change. I mean, I think our best effort is to produce a balanced budget, have town meeting adopted in April, then we can start July 1 knowing we have a plan. If something happens, either in revenues or expenditures, we can make an amendment in October or on the tax rate recap. But when we submit that tax rate recap to the Department of Revenue, it has to be a balanced spending plan with revenues and expenditures. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If we don't do that, then we can't have a tax rate approved. In my office can't issue bills, and then we'd have a revenue problem, and it would just spiral from there. So it's really important. We have to have a balance. When we submit that tax rate recap to the Commonwealth, it has to be a balanced spending plan at that point.
In October.
In October.
So do you feel that the timeline works?
I feel it does. I've really have not seen, and this is my 10th year as finance director, I cannot look back and say, at any time, and say, the calendar we have really makes it dysfunctional. I think it's worked well. Some years, as I say, are more challenging than others, depending on the economy. But in recent years, the economy's improved, as we all know.
There was one year where the Board of Selectmen asked the Finance Committee for their recommendation on a warrant article, and by the time the Finance got to the podium, which was the next meeting, the Selectmen had already voted on it, and it was a moot point. So, that's the type of situation that I wouldn't want to see in the future if possible.
Yeah, I know the Finance Committee has worked. They try to start the scheduling the hearings as soon as possible. I think one of the things that they've done in the last year or two is they try to focus more on the larger budget. So if it's a small office in the town offices that has a budget of, say, $200,000, they would rather spend their time reviewing, and I agree with that, is, the town manager and I review that small office, that's great. They'd rather focus their energy on reviewing larger budgets.
Thank you very much.
I was going to say, maybe the manager could comment on it more, but I believe from my own reading, the budget process in town meeting is really driven by statute and bylaw. The Mass General Law, Chapter 39, goes over that each community has to have an annual town meeting in the first few months, February through June, and that whenever they have their annual meeting, the Finance Committee has to present the budget. So you're pretty much locked into that first half of the calendar year. And it's our bylaw that actually picks the April, and it's not the charter. So you're driven by outside forces, really, to have that budget process starting in, November, December, so you can be ready, according to statute, to have that annual Springtown meeting.
I just think as we do it, I don't know if I said this before, but there are always going to be things that we may not know exactly. But what you have to do in this line of work is the town manager and I look at it, we look at the knowns, and we try to gather all those knowns, whether it's talking informally with Neshoba, talking with Middlesex Retirement, and then at some point you just have to make a projection and go with it. You may not hit a bullseye on every number, but I think if you've been doing it and you have the experience, make your most accurate projection and just roll with it and avoid the delay.
Thank you.
Ellen.
That's okay, I'm fine. I'm gonna hold my question
Okay.
for later.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Souza, we appreciate it. Anyone else?
Good evening. George Dixon, member of the Board of Selectmen for the last 8 years, and I guess I know most of you pretty well. And I have, from time to time, spoke to you about certain things we're going to discuss this evening. And I know we're not going to agree on some things, we're going to agree on others. I don't have a lot to say. I would like to start off, though, by thanking you people. I was the chairman when this committee was organized, and I want to thank you all for stepping up. And unless somebody has served on a committee like this, they don't realize how much time and effort and energy is used up over a long period of time, and how sometimes you have to change a lot of your own personal business to attend these meetings, and I respect you for it. And again, I thank you for it, and I'm sure the people out there do as well.
Thank you.
You know, I love this town. I've been here my whole life. I don't think there's anybody in this room that can't say the same thing, that they don't like this town. And what I have to say tonight has nothing to do with anybody personal, nobody that's currently in office or holding a position in town. I did have, probably got a lot of the stuff started on this this discussion with an informal, off-the-cuff communication with somebody in the news media, and on a different subject, and this came up, and so they asked me what my opinion was on the vote on hiring and firing town manager. And my answer was, I believe it should be 3 to fire, 3 to hire. I still basically have the same opinion, because, well, first of all, I'm not going to go back on my word, and I'm not going to step down because, you know, I took a little heat from a few people. It's not my style, and I think you people know that I'm a pretty straight shooter. I don't have a problem stating how I feel. I mean, there must be sufficient cause. This town has been here for 350, 370 years. I'll probably be here for another 370 years. I don't think there's any of us that are any bigger than the town of Chelmsford. So, again, my remarks are not directed at any particular individual or individuals. I've been. This is, as I said, this is my 9th year on the board, and I've worked with I don't know how many different boards, and I'm not sure I ever worked with one that I could have said that 4 people, I could find 4 that were going to agree with it, with everybody. You know, I mean, everybody's always has their own opinion, and that's why I think the government is good. By the way, John says it's very easy to elect, to get some friends elected. If I ever did decide to run again, I'd want him to be my campaign manager, because I've never seen and I think anybody else here that's run before has, it's not that easy to get elected in this town, especially the longer you stick around, the harder it is to make friends. It's very easy to make enemies, but it's hard to make friends. I just wanted to say that, you know, I'm not going back. It's not on my 3 to 3. I've spoke to some of you people about it and about other things, and some I haven't spoken to. I spoke to you about a lot of things, not even regarding the town. I mean, I like to talk to people, so when I see you on the street, we talk about the town. We all love the town. We all have, you know, I would hope that something like this would never come to fruition, whether it's 3 to 3, 5 to 3, 9 to nothing. It doesn't matter, because when we're wasting energy on negative things, this town isn't going forward. I'd like to see this town to continue to go forward. We've got a great town. We've got great people, great citizens, that people like yourself who volunteer, people who I serve with, who are all very, very interested in what happens in the town. We all have different opinions, and we're not afraid to express them. And I think it takes a lot of courage for some people to get up and tell the town exactly how they do feel. Because it's easier to be a money-minded quarterback, which I think there's a town is full of them. And whatever position you may hold, it's easy to criticize, to be criticized, and for others to criticize, and to criticize others. So, you know, I just made a few notes, and as I was going along, I only came in to substantiate what, and I apologize for not coming in early when you sent me a letter, Sam, back when I was the chair. I thought it was directed to me, and I didn't even mention it to the other members because but I did answer you, if you recall, that I wasn't going to.
It doesn't matter, you're here now.
Well, I guess so, but I just wanted people to know that some of the other people may have been here previously if I had maybe, told them about your invitation, which I thought was meant, you were basically inviting chairs at that time. So I don't have much else to say except that, again, I hope whatever the final vote is, I just hope nothing ever has to come to that situation. And I'd like to keep the town positive. I'd like to be standing up here tonight and talking about something a lot different. For example, putting some money in the kitty and developing the 129 corridor, et cetera. But, I mean, this is something that's very important. And I know there are some things that we could learn from, and some of them are negative. And you can always take a negative and make it positive. We did have some bad experience with some contracts in the last few years, and cost the town dearly. And so I'd like to caution that we maybe keep an eye on those type of things, because, we do represent the taxpayers, and I think we paid an awful lot of money, and we lost some good educators and a lot of good quality time in this town, just putting out fires instead of building the future. So, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, that's good, we appreciate it. Let me just by way of clarification, you mentioned that you would favor a 3/5 vote for termination of the town manager, and I believe...
And also to hire.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make clear. So both sections 4.1, which relates to the hiring of the town manager, and section 4.7, which relates to the termination. So you would be in favor of a 3/5 rather than a 4/5 supermajority?
Yes, that's
on both
correct.
sections? Okay, all right. Good. Anyone else? Questions of Mr.
Mr. Dixon, thank you for your comments about this committee, and I assume by extension all the committees of volunteers in the town.
Yes, sir.
Without exception, I'm sure we share your love for the town.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. When you concluded that a 3/5 vote would be sufficient, we've had some instances in recent years where there's been a lot of money put into some campaigns in town, one for the removal of selectmen, and so did you consider the possibility that in a year where 2 selectmen may be elected, that there might be a large influence of, financial input to an election process that could sway the election to add 2 more votes to maybe 1 dissenting vote?
I think I recall, and I think I have a pretty good idea which particular election you were referring to. I think I was involved in that election. I wouldn't back down from any of them. I mean, if we feel that we have that kind of pressure, and people aren't being treated fairly, I think we just got to go out and work harder and maintain what we have. I think people have to get more involved anyway in this town. There's too much apathy. So maybe that's not the answer you're looking for.
No, I just wanted to know if
But I take into consideration.
that, and I think you answered it.
I wouldn't be afraid. I'm not afraid of them. I mean, myself personally. But Could it happen? I suppose it could happen. Anything could happen. Now, you could get, you could get 2 this year and 1 next year, or, I mean, if they really want to do it, I guess but it'd take a lot of time, and I think the people in this town are a little too smart. I don't see, I saw somebody spend an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money to ruin this town, and we're sitting here tonight, and they may be home watching it on TV, or they may be fishing down the street. I don't know what they're doing now, but,
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. McLaughlin?
George, what's the typical term of a town manager's contract?
I believe it's 3 years. I think each time I was involved in a contract extension, it was 3 years.
And how many votes does it take to approve or reject a contract?
I think it was, something, I'd be lying to you, David, but I'm under the impression it was 3.
So a simple majority to
Yes.
accept a new contract or not to renew.
I believe so. When there's a problem, I like to try to face it head-on as fast as I can. If there's a problem amongst some of the people on the board or with a manager or one of his employees, I like to go right in and say, let's get this thing squared away inside, behind closed doors. The last thing we want is to make, is to make people from the outside who are looking to invest money in this town think that, this town, we can't work together. I think we can all work together. Sometimes it's a little more difficult than others, but that's my approach. I go in, if Dave McLaughlin and I can't get along with something, we go out and have a Coca-Cola or a coffee, and we talk about it, and we try to resolve that problem. That's how I approach things, so.
But if the Board of Selectmen were to fire the town manager under the termination clause, is it in all likelihood that the remainder of the contract would be paid?
I believe in what I have read, he gets paid off for, so much time of his vacation time, his sick time, and I think there's like a 6-month payout or whatever. I'm
Probably
not sure about that. I never saw anything more than
On the
that.
individual contract, perhaps?
Yeah. Right. But I think with the other one that I referred to earlier, which was not, it was, nothing to do with the Board of Selectmen, but I believe that was a longer-term contract, and there was some other things in there that maybe aren't in our contract, right? So,
Anyone else?
thank you for having us in
Thank you
here
very
and
much. Appreciate it.
the opportunity to express our opinions and be straight with you. And, I'm always available, so if you ever want to get in touch with me, the door's open. Thank you.
Well, we'll probably be meeting for another 6 months, so drop by anytime.
I'll send a cake over here next year. Thank you.
We have an open door policy, right? So, anyone else? Thanks.
Glenn Diggs, I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, Precinct 2, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First, I'd like to talk about 6-1, a little bit about that. The beginning of that says that the Board of Selectmen should be meeting with the school department on the budget. That doesn't happen. Now, why it doesn't happen, I don't have an answer for that. Obviously, whoever framed the charter originally felt that that was part of the process and was there for a reason. And I think that probably the school committee would be the ones who would weigh in mostly on why that happens or why it doesn't happen. They negotiate with the town manager, the school committee, and with Jay on an ongoing basis to develop that. It does come in late, extremely late. In this case, we were voting on it 3 days before town meeting. Now, whether or not that can be done any faster, that's conjecture. The reason is that many of the input that they need to develop the final budget, the numbers that come down from the state, which they have no control over. So they try to do it as expeditiously as they can, but in some ways they are held hostage by the state. Whether or not they can come down to a number, a final number, and fit the pieces in, maybe that can be done. But they are really held hostage by that. Pushing it back, does that add anything to it? Probably not. It's like if you have a deadline. Let's say that you're going to college and you have a paper due on the 5th, and you're going, if I had another 3 days, and something happens and the professor says, you know what, I made a mistake on that date. It's really not going to be due, on Columbus Day. I'll give you a couple more days. Then the day before it's due, you're saying, I wish I had another 3 days, because you can always push it back. That the finite date helps everybody achieve getting there. So I'm not sure I don't believe that would change anything. But in terms of the process, does the Board of Selectmen need to be involved with the school committee on helping to define their budget? I'm not sure that's really apropos. In relation to the question on 43333, whatever anyone wants to agree on, I basically support 333. Right now it's 344. And it's 4 to hire, 3 initially to suggest that the town manager should go. He's entitled to a hearing, and at that hearing there's another vote, and that's a 4 supermajority. And then after that there's a final vote, and that again is a supermajority. And I've been at some of your meetings before, and I know that the chairman has been doing a review of various towns to see if there's some guidance there or some commonality. And I am still working. So I don't have as much free time as I would like in some ways. But I did check the charters of 3 towns, and I really used the scientific approach to figure out which 3 towns I should choose. I went back to the alphabet, and I said, do I know any towns that are lettered A or B or C? And so what I checked was Andover, North Andover, and Billerica. And what I found is that if you want to terminate a town manager in those 3 towns, it's 333 or 3-3. Some of them don't have 3 steps. And I also found, again, my sample is tiny, that the newer that the charter is, in other words, ours will be brand new in 2019. Is that too fast for you guys? I don't know. But the newer it is, the longer the document is and the more detailed the document is. That when the charters were done for some of the older towns, and Andover seems to be fairly long in the tooth. North Andover was done in 2015, or redone in 2015. That the document is shorter and kind of more loosely structured. And it also seems that, having the wherewithal to write a town charter from scratch is probably pretty tough, and you need a lot of talent to do that. So in many cases, they're copied one to the other. In other words, I do mine, another town comes in, takes a sample of 3 or 4. So there's some commonality, seems to be there's some commonality in terms of the language or the way they're put together. But again, I have a tiny sample. But my sample said that there does exist towns that are fairly close by, that are fairly substantial towns that do live by a different set of rules. Now, it seems that the basic ideology of why one method is preferred over the other comes down to this. If I'm a town manager, all I have to do is keep 2 people happy and I'm golden. On the other hand, if you, on the other side, you say, well, all I have to do is get 3 disgruntled people and we're golden. And the truth is that trying to get a group one way or the other is not as easy as it sounds. That, my personal feeling is trying to get 4 people on the Board of Selectmen to agree on anything is this serious. Not on minor things, but on serious things like this, it's probably going to be pretty much impossible. Other than if it's clear-cut, criminal case, dereliction of duty, fraud, some major guffaw that anyone would say this is a cause for a problem here. But there are things that are short of that are very important. For example, let's say that you were the President of the United States and you were having tremendous civil disorder in the country. You would want an executive who is strong domestically, that can deal with those kind of problems, all right? But because they're strong there, they might not be so good in foreign policy. So therefore, you get the country and you get around all the domestic problems and you straighten that out. Meanwhile, the other side is kind of going weak. So then you have this thing called an election where the populace comes and they say, you know, we've got this cured, but now we need to go off in a slightly different direction and we're looking for a different set of skills. And so the next person that the election takes place, one person is maybe still on the domestic side, one person is more on the foreign policy side, and the electorate decide which way we should go. Well, it's no different whether it's at the local level or at the state level, that there are times when someone can be doing a fabulous job, and I'm not saying anything about the town manager, I am talking about a town manager maybe 20 years from now who might be Mickey Mouse or Joe Schmo, whoever it may be. But that person has a certain set of skills and he's doing a fabulous job, but something is amiss. And, you know, through the guidance, and the word has come up here a number of times, that the Board of Selectmen work with the town manager in terms of guidance. But the guidance can only go so far. And that the Board of Selectmen are you know, they're the ones who live in town and have the hearts of the town people, and they carry around those hearts all the time. And it's their job to look 10 years ahead and make sure those hearts are well cared for. And, you know, the feeling is that, you know, we need some sort of latitude, that we don't need to go out and have a catastrophe of a town manager 20 years from now to act. That we are the visionaries, supposed to be the visionaries who live here, talk to people every day, see people every day, and carry that message forward of what needs to be done to ensure that the quality of life that people enjoy today in the town is there in the future. And so, if the requirement is for almost an impossible situation to take place, we need to step back and take something a little bit short of that. And that's why I am in favor of 333. In fact, you know, I think that one of the tenets of the 333 should be that the chairman has to be one of those three people. And partly that is because it was brought up that, well, one person can go out and get two more to run. Well, as one of the previous people said, you know, it isn't easy to run. It isn't easy to get elected. But the chairman is generally looked at as a little bit above the rest of the Board of Selectmen. They have the esteem of everyone. They are not just a newbie, just stepped in and elected chairman. They've been here. They may be here for multiple terms, and that they have a broad idea of the town and what is needed. And that would tend to ensure that, you know, just some disgruntled group could not just step in and, you know, push their will on the town. So again, I think that it should be 3, 3, and 3. I think it should be the chairman has to be one of those three, and that should be carried forward. You know, the Constitution of the United States was written a long time ago, but we have had changes that come forward. And change is not easy. You know, I'm a newbie in this arena. I come from a business background. And one of the things that I have learned fairly quickly is that change does not come easily in the public sector. That change takes years. It may take decades. In fact, in some cases, it takes a lifetime, or more than a lifetime. And the Constitution has, over a period of time, had amendments that were early, midlife, and later in life to deal with the situation because the world changes. That the people who developed the original charter and the subsequent revision thought hard, and they worked in an arena of their times. But times have changed, and that the town needs to change with that. So, we just feel that, we have to have some measure of not a full sword, but a partial sword. To deal with the question that David asked earlier, it takes a simple majority to renew the contract, according to the existing contract. And the charter reads that the town manager can be hired for any amount of time you want. It doesn't have a defined the term involved in it. It could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. The logic for a longer term is it's not insulting. 2, if it's a new town manager who is relatively young, you know, it's like a football player. Well, you can go out and get that veteran, and you're going to get X for a period of time, or you can try to go out and get that young guy who you know has potential to be way ahead of these older people, but he's going to take a little seasoning and a little learning as he goes along. So it doesn't say how long that has to be, and it doesn't say how long the re-signing has to be. That's up to the parties involved. In terms of what has to be done, certainly there has to be a proper severance for a certain period of time. Usually, in most of the charters I read, it's 6 months or shorter if the person is leaving on their own will, but certainly there needs to be that, and vacation and so forth, and benefits and all that. That's certainly understandable. But, you know, it's saying that the Board of Selectmen is taking into consideration all the facts. The person someday who's out there could be fabulous. My experience has been nobody is irreplaceable. There is always better. And if there's not better, there's a way to find it in a different area. That he's not as good this way, but he's better that way, and that's where we need to be now. And maybe in 10 years, that's not what we want anymore. But there should be a way to do that, and do it without dragging everybody into it and creating a big scene. You know, we already went through one of those. And, you know, if a better way were in place, maybe we wouldn't have had to go through that. So again, I urge you to accept the recommendation, mine. Again, I'm not speaking for the board. And that, you know, we're not telling you, we're not saying to you that you're deciding this, because you're not. All we're asking for you is to say, you know, it has some merit, and we need to pass it on to the next step, because the next step is it's going to go to town meeting. And then if it passes the town meeting, then it's got to go to the electorate. So, you know, it's not going to be some easy, quick fix, and you're going to decide it. You're the gatekeeper now, that's all, from letting it go forward and letting others to decide, because it's such an important issue that they should have the opportunity to speak about it on their own. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
I have a couple questions. If I heard you correctly, you think that the most recent, newer charters are more likely to have a simple majority vote for hiring and firing town managers?
No, what I'm saying is that the 3 that I looked at, one was newer, one was a little older, and one was very old. And all three of those were 3, 3, and 3. That you could probably pick 3 others at random, maybe, and get the same result. But I know
think I heard something about modern charters.
Well, modern charters, the 2 that were the most recent were the longest documents and the most detailed. The one that was the oldest was the most open.
Okay.
What were the towns you mentioned again?
Andover, North Andover, and Billerica.
Do you feel that
That was taken from.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Since you asked the question, we're going to answer it. North Andover, the original charter was adopted in 1986. Billerica's charter was adopted in 1979. And my records indicate that Andover is a non-charter town. So their governance is by local documents and special acts.
And I took it from the website of all 3 towns under the title Town Charter.
Okay, so my second,
The one in North Andover was revised in April 2015.
people generally think of removal of a town manager for a reason. He's out of sync with the times, he's not doing the job properly. Do you believe that every member of the Board of Selectmen is capable of determining that the town manager is or is not doing a job proper to retain him?
I think that the Board of Selectmen's job is to set the tone for the town. They don't have any direct governing powers whatsoever. They set the policy. And their role is kind of sitting back and just looking out over the landscape. seeing what's going on. You know, the town right now, it seems to be that we're on a teeter-totter. And we're in the middle as far as financial health. You know, we're paying our bills, we have a good bond rating, we're now at the full levy, and, you know, how much would it take to go over that? You know, some people have said that we had a number of things go against us this year. Well, you can say that every year, or you can say it not every year. That I think we need to be more focused.
My question was quite different than that. You're giving kind of a financial analysis or a situational analysis of the town, and you may be right. So the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen, I think. You know, so the Board of Selectmen determines who you hire and who you fire. So my question was basically, do you believe each member of the Board of...
Can you just say that again? What you just said?
The Board of Selectmen hires a town manager.
Right.
And the Board of Selectmen can fire the town manager.
Right, just the town manager. We don't have any involvement with any other positions.
Yes.
Other,
I think that's all I said.
Okay.
Okay, just...
That's what a strong town manager means.
So, my question was, back to the original question, do you believe that every member of the Board of Selectmen is capable of determining that the town manager is or is not doing a job sufficient to retain or let him go, or her?
Well, all right, first of all, I'm a relative newbie, having been there 1 year. I believe that if the town didn't believe that those people were capable of doing it, they wouldn't have been elected in the first place.
So your opinion is that each of the members of the Board of Selectmen are capable of determining that the town manager should stay or should not stay in his current job?
Yes.
That was my question.
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead, please.
Just to reiterate, you did say 3, 3, and 3.
3, 3, and 3, but one had to be, at every step,
Chairman.
had to be the chairman of the board.
Why would you not think that 3, 3, and 4 would be better? To me, it seems like the final vote, it would give it more reinforcement.
Yeah,
And it tells the town that you've convinced another person.
Because, I'll tell you why.
Okay.
If you envision what it's going to take to do this, it isn't easy. It isn't easy from the standpoint of effort and time, reputation. Many factors would come into this. If you watch what happened during the whole school administration situation, it sucked all the air out of the town almost for a lengthy period of time. And I would not want to go into that process unless the outcome was defined at the beginning. To go through all of that and then at the end not get the fourth one, I don't think that would be worth going through the effort at all. Be consistent all the way through. That's my feeling.
Well, if you were consistent all the way through, then I would think that the first vote should be the final vote.
In one of the charters, it read there's only 2 steps. We have 3 steps. And I think 3 steps is fairer. It's not an easy thing, and I think it's done the right way in terms of 3 steps. I would not change that whatsoever.
But if you're not convincing someone else, why go through the 3 steps?
Because you already have convinced, there can be 2 people who are already adamant for whatever reason. They get the opportunity to change their mind. It doesn't say that it can't be 5-0 at the end. It just says that it can be as little as 3-0. And let me reiterate, again, this is not about the town manager. It's about a town manager. And I'll go on record by saying that if someone were to bring to me this kind of question within the next year, I would vote against it.
I understand that.
Okay, yes, David? Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you just clarify your last comment?
Yes, if, let's say that this passed town meeting
This
today,
way.
this issue. It
If
passed
the-
333. It was
333.
elevated from this commission. It went to town meeting, and they endorsed it. And then it went on the ballot, and they endorsed it. I wouldn't vote for it for at least a year after that, for sure, to have it settle in before you do that, because this is serious stuff. and it needs to have a period of gestation to do it properly.
Anyone else? Okay, I would just like to make a couple of comments. And thank you very much for your input. We certainly do appreciate that. You had indicated that you looked at 3 towns and looked at their governing documents. I just would like the record to reflect that we have done an analysis of 46 charter towns. That is towns that have a home rule charter granted by the legislature. Now, you can go up on town websites, and you can go into their governing documents section, and you will even find documents that say charter, but it's not a home rule charter. That's the locality's termination that they've chosen to call their governing document. So you will find those situations. So there are, what we did was we said, let's take a look at all the towns in the state that have home rule charters and are governed by at least a 5-person board of selectmen, and who have a town meeting form of government. So there are 46 communities that fall into that category. Then we said, okay, in addition to that, let's take a sampling of area towns. And area towns we define as Chelmsford is the base town, and then every town that is contiguous to Chelmsford, and then every town that touches a contiguous town to Chelmsford. So that gives you 15 area towns. Now, of the 15 area towns, 7 of them are already in the 46 charter towns that we reviewed. Okay, so we have information, and this is just really for the general public's information, because you touched upon looking at some town charters. So just to summarize, we've looked at 46 charter towns. We've looked at 7 of which are in the Chelmsford area as defined, and then we looked at 8 other towns that happen to be non-charter towns that also constitute area towns. So we have data for all of those municipalities and subgroups indicating how many of those towns require a supermajority to hire, how many require a supermajority to suspend, how many require a supermajority to terminate, how many require a supermajority to hire and terminate, and how many require a supermajority to hire, terminate, and suspend. So we have data from 54 towns that we've looked at. Okay, just want to get that on the record.
I mentioned that during my presentation.
You didn't mention the number of towns or the categorization, so I wanted to get that on the record. Okay? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Diggs, is there not a bigger problem than just hiring and firing? Is the problem more described as the relationship between any sitting board of selectmen and any sitting town manager?
I
The
think
ability for the board to manage the town manager or the town manager to manage the board?
I think that when it's virtually impossible to terminate someone, and I envision the 4 that way, other than for gross reasons, that there isn't a lot of, and this is just in general in life, it could be in the private sector, it could be in the public sector, that there's not a lot of reason for someone to listen a lot. That the easier it is, and relatively easier, and again, not easy, but relatively easier, to make a change, puts someone in a better position to listen more. So, I've been to your meetings, and the word guidance comes up a lot. And also comes up a lot that there's a lot in the charter of power to the Board of Selectmen, although it's not stated verbatim. But if you read it, it's there. And that, maybe directing your question about listening, maybe it is that the Board of Selectmen doesn't talk loud enough. I don't know because, again, I haven't been around long enough to say that. But I would say that the point that you bring up is definitely something that is certainly at the core of the question.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your input. Ms. Merrill?
Good evening, Laura Merrill, Board of Selectmen, also representing my own input, not the board. I will not be as lengthy as the previous speaker, although I do agree with a lot of what has been stated by both of the previous speakers. First of all, I just want to say, to start with, this is not about, for me, this is not about this town manager. Do I have any intention or desire to terminate the current town manager? No. Do I think he's perfect? Almost. Do I think he has the skills and knowledge to successfully manage this town for the next 5 to 10 years? Yes, absolutely. Do I think it would be simple to replace him? Certainly not. Have I gained respect for him while working for him, with him over the last 2 years, as he has helped me learn what my role is and learn about how this town is managed? Absolutely. This isn't about that. My mother was a history teacher, and one of the first phrases I learned as a kid was absolute power corrupts absolutely. None of us, not even the most altruistic soul, is above this. And we live in a society that is built on checks and balances. And these exist to help us from any one person or any organization from becoming too powerful. Regardless of whether we work in the private sector or the public sector, we need to understand that we have to be accountable to someone else. Otherwise, we don't perform our best work. We aren't attentive to the needs around us, and we aren't giving it everything we need to. One of the things that I feel when I look at this proposal, this amendment proposal, the Board of Selectmen, that board changes every year. I don't think anyone has managed, the board has stayed the same for any more than a few years. It's always changing. But just because the town manager doesn't agree with the current board, it doesn't mean he doesn't have to listen to them. And because the board is elected by the people, and it is that is what the people want. So they has to be responsive to that change. The town manager can be the same town manager year after year, decade after decade, but he has to be responsive to what the people want. Otherwise, he's not effective. One of the things I heard today is concern that this may allow the board to act more rashly, but I think the purpose of having a multi-year contract is to provide a measure of prudence, another check and balance against this, so that that doesn't happen. I think in recent experiences, it was noted, specifically with the schools recently, that if there's a need to buy out a contract when there's a problem, then we need to take care of that. If there's somebody who's not performing their role in a manner which satisfies the governing board and the people, then we do what we can, we allocate the money, and we make a change. If in the case of these unfortunate and rare circumstances. The other thing that we can learn from that experience is that we don't always hire the right person the first time out. So if for some reason the town manager, we had to replace the town manager, and we found out that the replacement was not working out, wouldn't we need the ability to act on that more quickly rather than have the town trying to suffer the negative impacts of this for several years? I think changing the charter to allow a 3-3 vote would ensure that the town was never handcuffed in a way that, to a town manager that is not responsive to the changing needs and attitudes of the town over time. That's really all I had to say on that.
Just to be clear, so your opinion is that you would like the charter to be changed for a simple majority for both hire and terminate?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Ms. Merrill, why should it be the same number to hire as to fire?
Again, having been a part of the board as well as town meeting for the last few years, it is extremely difficult to get a supermajority on anything, and if we were in a circumstance that we had to find a new town manager, I wouldn't want to leave the town in a circumstance where we went an extended period of time because we couldn't come to an agreement.
But isn't there provision in the charter for a temporary town manager while you're doing that?
I'm sure there is, but that doesn't replace the town manager, and it doesn't mean that the temporary town manager
You can always
is
find Bernie
the
Lynch,
person.
right?
Exactly.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
You-
What I'd like to do now, and I don't mean to disrupt the flow here, but we've got representatives from the school committee here, and it's almost 8:30, and I'd like to give a chance to the school folks here to give their input.
Absolutely. The only comment on the other
Oh, I'm
issue
sorry, I
that's been
thought you
discussed.
were through.
I will be extremely
I
brief.
thought you were through, and I apologize.
Again, I agree with a lot that has been said, but one thing that hasn't been mentioned is that with the budget coming so late, in addition to the boards not having enough time to digest it and make educated votes on this, we're not really giving the town representatives a fair chance to educate themselves on the final budget, because ultimately they are the ones who are voting for the money, and they should have a chance to get their hands on this as well.
Just a question with regard to that remark. Is it that that's right way to say this, is it that the budget's coming too late or the town meeting's coming too early?
I think the budget is coming too late, and it's not just the fact that we put a preliminary budget online. Unless you have your own printing service, it is very difficult to digest that budget online. It's the books that really everyone needs, and they get their hands in there and start going through it, and just having a week is really not fair.
So what you're saying is whatever the process is in the town, it's too slow, and they aren't creating the document as fast as you think they should be able to create it?
I think that if there's a way that we can get even another week, that document can get in the hands of the town meeting representatives, because the boards, the members of the board, a lot of them are involved with these discussions throughout the year, and so they may have a peripheral knowledge of the topic, they may be following to a certain extent, and they are able to more quickly come up to speed when the final comes out. But for many of the town meeting reps, many of them are still not educating themselves on all the issues of the town until the review meeting a week before town meeting, and that's just not enough time to read the whole book.
If the budget document came out at exactly the same time it comes out now, and we moved town meeting 2 weeks later, would that solve the problem?
Only if we also solve the problem of getting that book into their hands. So that would be, we couldn't, if we had the book but nobody knew to go pick it up,
So you've
that
said
wouldn't
book,
help.
you've said book several times.
Right.
So you, I don't recall getting a book mailed to me this year. I pulled it off the web. So you're suggesting that the town meeting reps should have a document in their possession, perhaps mailed to them, that was the budget?
If, perhaps, it is the book that was printed on the yellow binders this year. Every year it's a different color, but I know that is really when people get of what's going on and
That's it.
start digging into the
Right.
process.
They either come in here and pick it up, because it was
Ex-
available early, which is probably not what most people do, or they pick it up at town meeting.
Or the review meeting, so maybe we
Right.
put the review meeting a week earlier, and that would bring people out and give them an extra week to think about it. But that's just what my experience over the last few years regarding the budget process in general.
Sam. Laura, who orchestrates the budget process from start to finish?
I believe that the Finance Committee is in charge of getting that book published and between.
And so they run the process? Does everyone agree with that?
No,
Sheila?
no.
What's-
So-
I don't think the finance committee orchestrates it. I think it's the town manager.
So you think it's the town manager, you think it's the finance
There's
committee?
two different yellow books. There's the warrant book, which is produced by the finance committee with their recommendations, and the
Is
budget
that the one
book.
you're talking, which one are you talking about?
The spiral bound one,
Well, the spiral bound one has got the meat in it, so they kind of go hand in hand. You don't, you need the one that has all the articles, and then you need the meat, and you start putting it together, and that's really where people are getting their information from, so.
So when you say budget, you mean all the financial numbers, whether it's the operating budget or that plus the individual warrant articles? Is that what
Exactly.
you mean?
Yes.
and I believe.
So you still, but you still think it's the finance committee, and you disagree?
No, well, I know, no, I believe that it is the two different groups that are putting these two documents together.
Is-
I just don't understand.
Is some of the dilemma that there's some uncertainty as who's in charge of running the process? That's, I don't know the answer
I
to that.
don't think the numbers are available based on these other discussions, so they don't print the book until they're sure of what the numbers.
Because I would have thought the charter's written that the town manager orchestrates
let's-
the
wait,
I
Yes,
process.
believe,
okay,
I
let's-
believe it's
let's-
Mr. Souza that takes care of the budget book, and he could probably
As,
comment.
at the town manager's direction or
Well,
independent?
Let's cut to the chase. The charter places the management of the budget process squarely on the shoulders of the town manager.
That's what I thought.
That is
right.
clear. There is no argument there, okay? The FinCom acts in an advisory capacity. The FinCom facilitates the process by preparation of their warrant book, which also they are required to do by charter, okay? So but let's not misunderstand who has the ultimate responsibility for managing the budget process for the town. It is the town manager.
So unless we want to change that, the charter's written the way it's supposed to operate.
Correct.
The
And-
question then is, apparently it doesn't operate the way we think it's supposed to.
Okay, but, and we can have that discussion later. Right now, we're taking input from folks, and they're giving us their opinion, which is what we want. So
Right.
we can talk about that later. So are
Thank
you?
you.
are
I'm done, and I appreciate your time this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, I am interested, we haven't heard from the school folks. I do know that Mr. Lefebvre, a selectman, would you like to say something?
If you want them to go first,
Okay.
Ken Lefebvre, Board of Selectmen, but again, I'm here just representing myself. I would have to reiterate Laura's comments. I think Paul also does a fantastic job. This is not, in any way, shape, or form a referendum on his job that he's doing currently. But after, for the last few weeks, attending the charter review meetings or over the last month or so, talking to different members around, people around town, sort of offline, speaking to other people on other boards, I would probably support a 3-3 or a 3-3 process of both hiring and terminating the contract. If there's worry about how that could go awry down the road, then I would support Glenn's comment about making one of those votes the chairman. Simple as that.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, any questions?
Any comments on the budget process, or are you too new to the job?
Well, I found this year, pretty fast and furious. I had a lot of fun at town meeting. I think if you had, like Laura said, maybe another week or so, I looked at the budget, went through the budget, made notes in my book, and had it ready. but I didn't know it as probably as cold as I wanted to. So when people were referring to numbers, I found myself, trying to go through the book back and forth, figuring out. I found it a little hard to follow in the book itself. And I was scrambling sometimes for looking for numbers that people were referring to make sure I understood where they were coming up with some of the numbers. So I think if I had a few more days in there to study it, one more weekend, I think it would have been, and that could be too, I'm new to the process, sitting at the front table and making sure I know what I'm talking about or thinking, so forth. So I would agree probably a little bit more, maybe one more week would be helpful.
Okay, anybody else?
One quick question.
Go ahead, Sheila.
I asked this before, and your thoughts about a 334 versus a 333?
Well, again, I find in discussions when you're up there talking with the other board members, it is much harder to get consensus than you would think.
But wouldn't you think that would be solidify a vote?
You mean if you had 4?
Hmm.
Well, I think that definitely sends a message, if you're able to get 4. And I think that you're only going to get 4 when it is truly an apparent egregious act. I'm a little looking forward 10 years, seeing where the town could be going growth-wise. I can understand why you'd want a 333, especially if it's moving in a way you don't want it to move, so that you're able to act quickly. And then on the flip side, I don't know when we'll be looking for a new manager, but if you pick the wrong one, I'd want to make sure you're able to rectify that quickly too, and not have to worry about how do we get rid of someone that's not the right fit for Chelmsford.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to give anybody from school administration an opportunity to give their input at this time, if they wish.
Thank you, Jay Lang, Superintendent. I don't have an opinion on the first part of the matter. Just when it comes to the budget, I guess just a couple of things that I would suggest is I would actually be concerned about the budget date moving too much further back in the spring. Typically, the school budget is going to come up probably the first or second town meeting evening. And if we're looking at the last Monday in April, possibly that last week in April, as we get too deep into May, if for whatever reason the budget did start to slip into May, we have different statutory requirements for staff notifications if there was ever going to be a layoff or a reduction in force, things like that within the schools. So it's actually important to be able to make those decisions earlier in the process than later. So personally, I would be a little concerned if the process slipped a little bit. I think on the school side, we're obviously, we work with the town manager as far as the recommendation for the budget goes. We're a little bit beholden to the state budget process because so much of our aid ultimately comes from the state. There's certainly the Chapter 70 funding, which helps support our base budget, but a couple of other, big grant programs and grant dollars, particularly a circuit breaker to help offset some of our special ed costs. We really need to get a sense of what, both the governor and the House budget is doing. So it's very difficult for us to come out too early with the budget recommendation and have it just be, too far off from what the final recommendation is going to be. So the town manager typically sends his budget out the last week in January, I believe. We typically do a preliminary school budget with the school committee in February. Then I have one other layer that the town doesn't have. So when the town manager makes a budget recommendation, it basically then just goes to town meeting, or goes through FinCom and town meeting. I put out a recommended budget, which then has to be approved by the school committee before it goes to FinCom and town meeting. So I have one other layer of approvals within that process. This particular year, the day that we actually had scheduled our first budget hearing on was one of the crazy snowstorms that came on a Tuesday, and that ended up actually just pushing off our whole budget process by another week and a half by the time we were able to schedule it. So that extra layer did take an extra couple of weeks this year, but it's not likely that the school committee would ultimately, again, depending on how close our recommendation is to what the town manager is recommending, it's not likely that they would actually then have an approved budget to go forward to FinCom. until sometime in March. And what ended up happening this year, FinCom was very good to schedule a preliminary budget hearing with us. We went in, we went through the budget document, how to read it. We met with the liaison group and went, kind of page by page through the document. And then they held action until the school committee was able to hold their budget hearing. And then we rejoined the FinCom for their recommendation for the town meeting book sometime in early April. Again, that process on our end, on the school side, probably could have been a week or two earlier if we hadn't had that fluke snowstorm. But that's about as early as we're going to be able to produce a school department budget. And I would just note that I would be concerned if the town meeting process started to go deeper than it currently is, just again because of some of those timelines.
Dr. Lang, thank you. I'm going to take the liberty of reading the annual budget policy here because I think there is a textural disconnect between what we are actually doing and what the charter says, and I think that it's ripe for rewording if indeed we're not doing what the charter says, but something else that seems to be working. We either do what the charter says or change the words to what we're actually doing that seems to be working. This is what it says in the annual budget policy. The Board of Selectmen and School Committee shall meet and confer prior to and during the budget process to review the financial condition of the town, review revenue and expenditure forecasts, and other relevant information in order to develop a coordinated and balanced budget. The Finance Committee shall participate in the discussions with the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee in an advisory capacity. The school superintendent and the town manager shall jointly develop guidelines consistent with policies developed by the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee. So what we hear over and over again is the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee. I don't see that happening. Is my observation incorrect?
Again, in my short time here, what I'm most familiar with is the tri-board kind of meeting jointly. So it's been the Board of Selectmen, the School Committee, and then the Finance Committee meeting more as a tri-board in January, and that was the meeting that Paul actually presented financial forecasts and things along those lines. But the groups did not, until we actually went individually to FinCom, the school department, the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, at least in this past year and 2 years, haven't conferred again.
Okay, yes, sir.
I don't know the history on that.
Just to follow up, the very next clause of the town charter says the preliminary budget as adopted by the school committee shall be submitted to the town manager at least 90 days prior to the spring session of the annual town meeting to enable the town manager to consider the effect, et cetera, et cetera. Do you...
Section 6.2.
Section 6.2, paragraph 2, right? Do you typically have a preliminary budget prepared 90 days before spring town meeting?
No.
And that's...
And
So,
again, I apologize, I don't know the history, but I would think that that's particularly,
Yeah, it's-
particularly difficult to do.
I don't think my committee member or I are here to
No,
beat
I
up
get
on
you.
anybody or anything.
Right.
I think we want to clear up the language because it says we shall be doing this and we're not. And one of my concerns is that this budget process written 20-some years ago may be outdated for today's modern financial planning and tools, things like that.
I certainly work with Paul and the town's finance team through the late fall and into the winter as far as what the financial forecast is going to be and what his recommendation for us is going to be budget-wise. I communicate to him, what our needs are and kind of where we're coming in, but it's not formalized with the school committee or the Board of Selectmen at that point in time. And again, I didn't make even a preliminary budget recommendation to the school committee until I think it was sometime in February, I want to say.
Mr. Chairman?
That is something we'd have
yes.
to look at again.
And I agree with Doug on these questions. We have what appears to be a, kind of clear disconnect between what we're actually doing and what the charter says we shall do, and everybody knows what the legal word shall means. We need to clear this up to either incorporate the policies that we are currently using, define clearly, this is what is happening in 2017, 2018, et cetera, or decide that these policies are the correct ones and request that they be acted upon, which I don't think is a good request from what I'm hearing in this meeting. So, there are things that appear to be working that are quite divergent from the words in the charter currently.
All right, I would agree with that, and I would say that that's probably a good place to end that discussion unless anyone else has anything to contribute.
Well, it seems to me as if the parties involved, town manager, board of selectmen, apparently, and school committee, have a process that they should be able to articulate that we then can incorporate any changes into the charter.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't think we're going to do that this
No,
evening.
no, but maybe that's an
He's
assignment,
recommending
Mr.
that-
Chairman, we could give to
I
The
understand.
superintendent, the town manager might want to take those two sections and tell us what's actually happening.
what's doable.
Okay, and I think that will require a little bit further discussion from this committee to decide how we want to define that, if we want to go forward that way.
On the other hand, other than creating a lot of angst among the parties, there's nothing illegal about what's being done. It's just a process that's making everybody grieve a bit, and perhaps we can fix that so there's less grief.
So we will obviously have a larger discussion on these sections, and then, as Mr. McCall has pointed out many times, we'll also have to take a look at the corresponding bylaws, because that also governs a lot of the process. So, anyone else for Dr. Lang while we've got him?
Just a quick question. Do you think that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen have enough time to review the school budget after the preliminary, or what is, and then also, is there a huge discrepancy between the preliminary and the voted, or not?
On any given year, I think that's where you're going to, it just really depends on funding levels. You're going to see it either be close to what the town manager is recommending, or it could be off. This year, I don't think it was, significantly off, but the school committee certainly still needed to deliberate on the budget and approve a budget document before it went forward to FinCom. I think, again, two ways of looking at that. Ultimately, the FinCom, they certainly, I met with them and we went through the budget. I personally think they had enough time. I don't know what they would say, but through the liaison group and then also the two FinCom meetings, I think there was enough time to go through the budget. I would think they would say the same. I think it really comes down to, in the end, it's the bottom line budget, say this year, the $57 million figure that ultimately is being recommended by the FinCom to the town meeting. And that's actually the number town meeting is voting on. They're not voting on the individual detailed line items within the budget. So I guess that would be a bigger question. I personally think they probably have enough time. We post our budget documents, our preliminary, and any time it changes, and then our final document to our website. I do email. I don't produce a printed copy or mail it to their homes, but we do send an email to all the town meeting reps with a link to our webpage to the budget document, so that they can go online and review it, prior to town meeting. And then we do have a printed booklet at town meeting, and it's available at our offices beforehand if someone really wanted to come pick up a copy. So, I guess I would think that they would have enough, particularly where they're really voting the bottom line as opposed to doing that line item detail. I do think FinCom spent a significant amount of time, going through. We spent almost half a day kind of going through and answering questions and just talking about the document. So I think there was sufficient time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Sam, just one more question. And I'll ask the same of the town manager, too. Is there any sort of requirement or performance metric as to how accurate the budget should be at the preliminary stage? Should that be within 5% or 2.5% or even 1%? Or
Personally, from my take, I don't know of any particular metric that's there. I think a lot of it comes from, the town manager in the fall would put out kind of budget guidelines to all the departments. We obviously receive those guidelines to get an indication of exactly what type of funding level is going to be available. There's nothing, I guess, on the school department side that restricts us from, presenting a larger budget and going through a process and kind of figuring out what our needs are and whatnot. But also, I'm not oblivious to the point of what the ultimate recommendation is going to be, and want to come in somewhat close to that. But there's no particular metric that says 1%, 5%, or anything like that.
If the budget's too low, they're going to have to come back to town meeting for more money. If the budget's too high, it creates free cash flow. So there are ramifications to the number being way off, right?
But there's no set. My understanding is that
I
there's
I don't think any department wants to come back to town meeting looking for more money. I'd rather not.
Okay.
And with regard to the 90 days, the manager has a similar requirement, but it's by bylaw.
Right.
He has to present the preliminary budget, which typically coincides with the tri-board meeting, which happens right after the MMA, where the governor gives his preliminary numbers. So that's typically it's been my experience, the driving force for that first meeting.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much,
much.
Dr. Lang. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Al Thomas, finance is not my area of expertise, but I have a couple of things I'd like to share. I think that the tri-board meeting is very, very important. That sets the stage for everything that takes place after that. I think one of the things that has facilitated development of the budget is the improved communication between the school department, specifically the superintendent, and the town manager and the people in the finance offices at the town hall. That has not always been the case, as you probably well know. And I think that makes the development, which takes place, as you've heard, over a long period of time from October into well in the spring, I think because it's going on constantly between those people, that's crucial. One thing that may seem funny, but I would like you to consider requiring the explanation of the town meeting to the town meeting reps. It's one night, and the percentage of people that go is pretty small. And so those of us that do go sit there and hear what I think is a good presentation. At least you know what all the articles are all about. And then we go to town meeting and do it all over again for the people that didn't bother to go. I don't know if it's possible, but I find that a very valuable thing. And as you go ahead, just kind of close up. As you know, our superintendent has a financial background as well as an educational background. And I think that helps a lot in the development of the budget. We were in good shape in terms of knowing where we were going from the time of the tri-board. That's why I emphasize that. In getting there, we had to make some $400,000 cuts toward the end. But we knew where we were going, and I think the town knew where they were going. The other person I just want to give a lot of credit to, and that I would encourage you to listen to, is John Souza. John knows that process forward and backwards, but I think between the superintendent working with the town manager and John, we're in good shape. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. I'd like to invite Mr. Cohen to give his thoughts.
Good evening, everybody. We've got a number of comments, and some of which are corrections and clarifications, but I want to step back for a minute and ask you to take a moment to recognize what's going on in society right now in terms of volunteerism. You don't have the people, like I said, rushing in to volunteer at town meeting, or rushing in to volunteer on town boards, or rushing in to participate in civic clubs and so forth. And so what you end up having is you have this change in society, and I think you've got to recognize that when you consider the changes to the charter, because I don't see that trend changing going forward. In terms of how it relates to the town manager, Bernie Lynch was here for 19 years. He had 17 selectmen in 19 years. I've been here not even 11 years. I've worked with 17 selectmen. And so I think right now I've got 3 board members who are on their first term. And so I think that has to be recognized in terms of the institutional knowledge and issues. But I also think it comes back to the point of, what does the charter really say about who does what? And if you indulge me for a minute, I think I can clarify some of this. Under section 3.2, it says that the executive authority of the town shall be vested in the Board of Selectmen, which shall be deemed to be the chief executive officer of the town. The Board of Selectmen shall be the chief policy-making agency of the town and shall have all the powers and duties given to boards of selectmen under the laws of the Commonwealth. The Board of Selectmen shall act by the issuance of policy guidelines and directives, and shall act only through the adoption of policy directives and guidelines which will be implemented by the officers and employees appointed by or under its authority. The town manager shall be the primary officer responsible for the implementation of policy directives and guidelines adopted by the Board of Selectmen. The daily administration of the affairs of the town shall be the exclusive responsibility of the town manager. And also in terms of appointment powers, just to make this clear, the charter says that the Board of Selectmen not only appoint the town manager, they appoint town council, they appoint the town accountant, and they also appoint the personnel board, public celebrations committee, and board of registrars. So so there is more influence beyond, and the idea of that is that the town accountant is an independent voice of what's going on in the town financially from the town manager. Now, move on to the section 4.3, the town manager administrative duties and powers. It says the town manager shall be the chief administrative officer of the town and shall be responsible to the Board of Selectmen for the proper operation of town affairs for which the town manager is given responsibility under this charter. And then it elaborates on the responsibilities. And I'll just quickly summarize them. To supervise, direct, be responsible for the efficient administration of all officers appointed by the town manager, administer all provisions of bylaws applicable to the town, coordinate all activities of town departments under the direction of the town manager, attend all meetings of the Board of Selectmen, keep the board fully informed as to the needs of the town, and recommend to the selectmen for adoption such measures requiring action by them or by the town as the town manager deems necessary or expedient. To ensure the complete full records of the financial administrative activity of the town are maintained, to be responsible for the maintenance and repair of town facilities, responsible for the purchase of all supplies, and then it concludes with maintain a complete inventory of town-owned real estate property, minister with the personnel board policies for compensation, fix the compensation of all employees appointed by the town manager, responsible for the negotiation of all contracts with town employees. The town manager, subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen, shall employ special counsel to assist in the performance of these duties. Contracts shall be subject to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. To prepare and submit an annual operating budget and capital improvement plan. To keep the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee fully informed of the financial condition of the town, and to make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and other elected and appointed officials as the town manager deems necessary or expedient. To investigate or inquire into the affairs of any town department. To delegate or authorize any subordinate to exercise any power, to perform other duties as may be assigned by this charter, by law, or by the vote of the Board of Selectmen. Why I took you for that is, it's very clear. The town administrator doesn't set policy in this town. That's done by the Board of Selectmen. And I think what's happened over time is with the continual churning of the board and the split on the boards, 3-2 and so forth, there's been that struggle that quite frankly, as administrator and manager, you're caught in the middle of that. But I think it's telling to the town the fact that we've only had 2 managers in 30 years. And I think if you look objectively at the town's financial condition and the operations of the town, I think the town should be very proud of what's happened over the last 30 years. Particularly if you start looking at some of the other communities and some of the issues they've had and some of the turnover that they've had in the position and some of the issues that go on. A couple other things I want to touch upon. In terms of the budget process and time, I think quite frankly we spend too much time doing the budget. Because what it does is, as noted earlier, it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. And if you're working on the budget from October to April, you basically have spent half your year doing the town budget, which means you then only have half the year, including the summer months, which are tough, to do the other, really focus on the other activities of the town, including the policy and direction of the community. The whole issue of the budget certainty, folks, we're running a $130 million operation. Yeah, we don't know exactly what's going to be the final local aid numbers in January when the governor puts out his budget. But we know from history how things tend to go in an election year and a non-election year. And we get pretty close to where we are. And why that matters is, quite frankly, you just can't effectively go to the school department in September or October and say, hey, we're going to give you an extra $300,000. Because their schedules are all set. Their classes are all set. They can't go in October and say, we're going to add another 5th grade section, or we're going to go, add these new AP courses at the high school. That doesn't work. I think if you notice what happened this year, it was a bit of an anomaly. It was late because of the weather, and I think the other reason it was late, because again, I've been doing this for 11 years, The other reason it was late was the whole issue of the school statement of interest and the whole issue of the school building project, which was rather extraordinary. And I think that wasn't the case a year ago with the same superintendent, and I don't think it'll probably be the case next year. So again, we ought not to treat the anomaly as the current situation that's likely to go forward. Look, in terms of the removal of the town manager, if it's egregious, 4 of you will see it. 4 of the members of the board are going to see it. What you don't want to have is your elections pivoting around the town manager and your town manager sitting in the office wondering, well, gee, where is this going? Because the whole idea is you look at the responsibilities, you're supposed to do a long-term plan for the community. Financial, we do a 5-year financial forecast every fall. We update it in the spring. We do a 5-year capital plan. We've got a 10-year facilities plan. And that's what you're supposed to do in the community in terms of the long-term vision. And I think if you look at the results, it's worked pretty well. We haven't had chaos and disaster at town meeting. The budgets, whether it's Neshoba or the school budget or the town budget or the capital and so forth, have pretty much been adopted by the community with the support of the finance committee and the support of the capital planning committee that does that budget, as well as generally the support of the Board of Selectmen. Now, that's not to say there aren't dissenting votes, but I think, quite frankly, it's worked pretty well. And I think any objective measure, you would see that, because look, there were some tough things. When we had to deal with the fire station failure, to come back, and that was tough, to come back to the community and say, hey, we lost at the ballot, and I give George credit for that. George was the one who came forward and said, hey, maybe you can put it up on the hill here next to this place. But that was a very challenging vote, and I remember that night in 2005. And George working the other members of the board, basically getting their support to move that forward. That's how it works. It's a collaborative process. Many people say at town meeting, well, gee, they passed generally all the articles. Why bother? Well, that's because the administration, including John Souza, who does the finance, we know the culture of the community. We know what the community is expecting. And therefore, we're going to produce a budget that's going to, and a capital plan that's going to meet those expectations. This year was very clear. There was a clear push and a clear sentiment in this community for full-day kindergarten. And that involved 2 steps. The capital plan in terms of purchasing the modulars and finding the resources within the budget that we did to pay that debt service, as well as the operating costs to support that, including benefit costs. And we did that. And I think we brought Chelmsford forward on that because we were, again, a bit of an anomaly not offering that program, and I think the town's better for it. A couple other thoughts. Let me go back to the appointment. The appointment of the town manager is indefinite. I have an employment agreement that's basically a severance agreement. If that expires on June 30th, which it does, I'm not out on the street. The board needs 4 votes to remove the town manager. There's nothing in the charter that talks about, having an employment agreement to maintain the tenure in office of the town manager. But I think the thing that you're missing is with the 333 discussion is you need protection. No one, when you talk about 333, no one's talking about just cause or cause. Right now at 4, you don't need a reason. Yeah, you kind of go through this hearing thing, say, hey, we're going to vote, but bringing you in. But you don't need any justification. You just come in, if there's 4 that find it's egregious, you're gone. If you look at what's happened, look what happened at the school department a few years ago. That one, we had to write a big check. And if you look at some other communities in the globe and so forth, you see communities paying off these administrators to the end of their contract because of the whole issue of protection. And you say, well, why do we need that? Because you want to attract and retain quality people to do the job. That's what this community deserves, and quite frankly, that's what you need. We're one of the larger municipalities in Massachusetts in terms of the operations of the budget. And therefore, you want quality, but you also want to be able to attract and retain. Because quite frankly, what happens is when you start churning, communities get reputations. And they say, gee, they just churned 3 administrators on that in 6 years. Might want to stay away from that. And if you look, like for example, at a community like Andover, they ended up hiring an manager who had no experience as a manager. They brought him in from Connecticut. And again, and you kind of wonder, well, wait a minute, Andover's a pretty darn attractive community. And I think that if you look inside what happened there it was because of the political dynamic that had gone in the community, where basically the managers group looks at it, and again, there's a reputation that's out there. And we saw that in Baric. I mean, they were churning managers every 2 years. The latest one is staying for a while. But, you saw the one with the Wendy's comment and these other issues that were going on over there, and just churning, and you even see the same thing in Tingsboro, where they can't seem to keep an administrator more than 2.5 years. How does that serve the town long-term in terms of its vision and planning? Because again, I mind you, it's about administration of the town. It's not about policy. They elect those 5 people at that table to set policy for the town. And basically, you need a majority vote of that board to set policy. And I believe that in the 11 years that I've served, almost 11 years that I've served as town manager, I don't think I've ever flouted the board on any policy or direction that they've ever requested. And nor should you, because again, you've got to recognize your responsibility. The other thing about the protection for the manager is you've got department heads who you want to retain as well. Because they're looking up as well, saying, well, wait a minute, who am I going to be working for? Right now, we don't have civil service and police and fire. And basically, these people are at-will employees. So if you start changing the votes without the safeguards, these people are going to want employment agreements. And why wouldn't they? Because the police chief's not going to want somebody to come in and say, hey, you know what? We didn't like the way you handled that situation lately, and they're kind of leaning on the manager. You don't want that. And quite frankly, I think the town's reputation is pretty pure in that. We don't have the politics going into the operations of the departments of the town. And so I think, again, that has to be safeguarded, because I can tell you that people are looking up to seeing what's happening, meaning the department heads, in terms of where this is going. And quite frankly, let me give you another example. When Betty Delaney retired as town clerk, it was a pretty damn bold move to hire an out-of-town person to be the town clerk in this community. It had never happened before. But darn right, I think I made the right choice.
How's that working out? Yeah.
And I think it worked out, but you can see how that could have been a little bit different if there were pressure saying, you know what, maybe we should go with the town person. This one, may have been the assistant in the office, and this one may have been, so forth. And similarly, we've made tough decisions in terms of who to select for fire chief, who to select for police chief. I mean, you want that on a professional level. You don't want the influence coming from outside saying, well, what are they looking for in terms of who should have this job? Because it's meant to be done on merit. A couple other thoughts. In terms of the budget availability, we released the budget per the bylaw the last Monday in January. And again, that comes right after the governor's budget he has to release his budget the last Wednesday in January. We released the budget the last Monday in January. And as I said, we're close enough. Now, when you say, is the budget balanced? Well, technically it isn't, because, as you may recall, we have outstanding labor contracts. We don't have agreements with our police, 2 police unions, and our fire union. We got a hearing coming up in a couple of weeks with mediation with the fire union, and maybe those will come to fall town meeting. And the reason for that is the town charter prohibits the pre-funding of agreements. So therefore, you're right, the budget isn't finalized. But what does happen is the estimates you do in the spring versus the reality of what happens in the fall. And the biggest one is new growth. The assessors aren't finishing their new growth until June, July, August timeframe, in terms of getting out and doing the inspections. Because remember, we have a June 30th new growth period. That's the biggest driver, because remember, we're not getting much state aid now. It's all driven by the property tax. And as you know, there's been a strong sentiment amongst the board, rather split, in terms of the issue of the property tax, in terms of whether we should go to the full levy and so forth. Again, ultimately that decision, I put the ball in play, but ultimately that's recommendations from the Selectmen, Finance Committee, and Town Meeting ultimately decides what happens with that. The other issue of pre-town meeting, and I think it just speaks to the issue that I started out with. We had less than 40 people attend this year. And I think the trend is going down. I mean, part of it is you're asking them, repeatedly now. We're doing 4 3.5-hour sessions. And let's be honest, most of the people just pick up the books and the materials at the town meeting. And I'm not indicting anybody, but I think what they do is they go in there with an open mind. They respect the effort that the Finance Committee has done, because the Finance Committee gets that budget at the end of January. And as John described, they're holding budget hearings in February and into March with Neshoba, the different major department heads, and then they issue their report, which has to get printed at the beginning of April. So I think there is some weight to that, and I think that is respected. Same thing with Neshoba. They produce their budget, document at the beginning of February because they have to have it in advance of the first town meeting, which is Westford. And if you saw what happened in Westford, Westford's town meeting is earlier than ours. And like I said, I think to bring it all back down, I think if you come back and then extend the budget season, I think really you're just shortchanging other priorities that the town needs to focus on. Because quite frankly, when the budget is released in January, and then what happens is FinCom does its hearings, and then you have the selectmen election in beginning of April, and then the new board makes its recommendations because that's the one that's going to town meeting. But I don't see any way around that because oftentimes there is turnover on the board, so you really can't predate that. So we bring in all the department heads and have them come in at that first meeting in April after the election and explain what's going on. So I thank you for your patience, for letting me, to cover a number of topics, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for the town manager? Yes, sir.
Paul, do you feel you have enough authority under the charter to manage the budget process? I think that's what I heard you say.
Well, it's very clear.
Right. No, and as far as you're concerned, it works.
Yes, it works.
And you have enough authority within the way it's written to change schedules and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
So you're not recommending any change?
I'm not recommending any
to the
change.
process? Okay.
Right.
Did I hear you correctly that the town manager serves under the charter, but the contract really only addresses what happens on determination?
Yes. Yeah, basically what it is it's a severance agreement.
Does the contract set the salary, or does the
board votes the salary annually?
And that's independent of the charter?
Right. When I arrived here,
independent of the contract.
When I arrived here, I had a 3-year severance agreement, for lack of a better term. The first year's salary was in that agreement. On the subsequent years, the board does its evaluation and votes the salary. And if you saw what's happened, basically, I've taken the same cost of living guideline for the last 11 years as was given to the town. And then basically every 3 years or so, they would renew the severance agreement. And there's minor things in there, such as vehicle allowance and stuff like that. And there is a notice provision as well.
The comment I made earlier about the contract is incorrect, because I thought that more could be addressed within the terms of the contract than in fact can be. So I just want to make sure that's correct.
Yeah, the charter is very clear. The appointment's indefinite.
Yes. Anyone else? Yes, Sheila.
A quick question. The Board of Selectmen has their election, their elections at the beginning of April and then town meetings at the end of April. Does that create much of an issue with a changeover?
It can.
I mean,
it creates a very narrow window. I mean, basically, because of how April works, if you recall, the election's the first Tuesday in April. Then you've got the next Monday, which is when the board meets after they do the reorg a couple days after the election. Then the following Monday is Patriots' Day, so the board doesn't meet. And then the following Monday is the start of the the spring annual town meeting, the fourth Monday of the month. But I think, again, anybody who's running for the office, they pretty much have familiarized themselves with what's going on with the budget and what's going before the town meeting, because it seems to be an interminable number of debates and other activities going on where the boards are being asked to, their positions on issues and articles and so forth. So I don't think it's sort of foreign to them that, oh my gosh, I've just landed here, what have I got? I think that with the board, and in fact, I've had candidates come in and meet with me saying, hey, do you mind, could you take some time to go over the budget, explain what's going on here, what the rationale is for this, during the past, dozen years.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, you've got a copy of the charter, obviously, and in section 6.1, the annual budget policy, it appears that is not exactly what we do. We do what we do, but this doesn't represent the policy doesn't represent what the actual process is.
Yeah, let me explain why that may be the case. Communities develop a culture in terms of how they do things. And it's not uncommon, if you go into a community, you'll see it's not quite following what's going on with the charter in terms of what's actually done. So basically, I arrived on the doorstep of a manager who'd been here 19 years. And it was very clear in terms of how he was handling the process. When the capital committee was meeting, they met on Friday mornings and all these other aspects. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So basically, you just sort of say, hey, look, this is working effectively. And I think the purpose of the tri-board meetings was to bring everybody up to speed, saying, hey, look, folks, this is what we're looking at. And when you look at, and unfortunately, in recent years, where there's very little support from the state in terms of local aid, it's basically by the time you've done your fixed costs, there's nothing left. I mean, how many years have we told people it's a level service budget? It's got to be 6, 7+ years, and the only change this year was we did full day kindergarten. But most of the budget process is, okay, what do you need for the schools in terms of the step and lane increases? What have you got for your contractual obligations in terms of cost of living allowance? And as John described earlier, okay, what do we got on the town side? And then, oh, by the way, what's it going to cost us for health insurance? What did the Middlesex retirement go up? What did Neshoba Tech go up? By the time you've done all that, you're out of money. And so you're basically just looking at the departments and basically saying, hey, look, you've got to hold the line. So you don't see a lot of variation and fluctuation.
You've said two things that caught my attention very sharply. One was that the budget process is too long. I don't know what that means, and too complex. I don't know what that means either. But I assume that you have recommendations on how to tighten that up and make it more efficient.
Yeah.
And I would hope that somehow we could document those, and if that's the case, what the original charter committee did when they wrote this, the charter commission was trying to give the best representation of how they thought the town ought to create the budgets and ought to be able to talk with the school committee and the board of selectmen and the finance committee and what they are doing for advisory roles and something more concrete than that. But it doesn't seem that this represents what is actually working for us, whether it's made more efficient or not. Mm-hmm. So, we will talk further on this and hope that your office and Dr. Lang's office can help with providing language that is representative of what we are currently doing that we believe is effective, and we'll discuss whether we think that's good language for the charter or not. But what's in the charter isn't what we're doing. So,
no, but I think you ought to talk to the finance committee because
and the finance committee
because
as well.
because again, I've got a fixed deadline. It's that last Monday in January to produce a budget and capital plan.
But the linkage between groups that creates this, the linkage between groups that creates this complete process, is, at least to my ears anyway, is not what's in the charter.
Right, but I think again, when we do the tri-board meetings, that sort of is approximated that. It usually starts out with the last year's financial audit. Then it's the year-to-date report from the town accountant. And then it's like, okay, folks, what do we have ahead of us in terms of, again, the fixed costs, and what do we anticipate our fixed revenues are?
This tends to be a little bit more generic in some areas, but I just wanted to point that out, that there'll probably be a request from this committee, is there language that's more appropriate passed between the three, school committee, finance committee, board of selectmen, town manager, whose responsibility is for the budget. The second thing that was mentioned a little bit earlier, and I think Dean Thomas might have mentioned, or somebody else might have mentioned it, is the fact that so few people come to that review meeting. And it just entered my mind at the time, and it may be not appropriate for the way we conduct town meeting, is it possible to count a meeting where the entire content is reviewed and reports are given from the boards that are going to give reports as either the way town meeting first day is complete and over with prior to the next one, or do you believe that at least for the function that it serves, for the people that are interested in showing up, this review meeting is adequate?
I think it's adequate. If you look, I don't know of any other town that does this
Neither do
meeting
I.
information session. So again, maybe you look at it and say, is it necessary? Because again, if you're getting less than 25% of the attendance, here's the problem. Where they should be going and where you see it in other communities, they should be going to the finance committee budget hearing. Just like the school committee, you heard holds a budget hearing, and there's pretty good attendance there, and you saw it this year with the the whole issue of the fifth grade. Exactly. The finance committee budget hearing should be the same type of interest and activity, and I think perhaps the town meeting information session may be diminishing the role of the finance committee budget hearing, because again, the finance committee wants to hear from the community, and then they're going to vote their recommendation. So what I've typically seen in other communities is big attendance at a finance committee budget hearing. where they basically say, okay, we've met with our department heads, now we're going to hold an overall hearing, and we welcome community input, whether it's the amount on the school budget, whether it's the recommendation for the police, fire, what have you, and hear from the community. That's generally what you see in other towns. This town meeting information session is a bit unique. It is unique to Chelmsford. And so maybe, again, that might be putting some more weight into the finance committee, because again, I think they've been a little more efficient. I mean, as John noted earlier, they're not going to spend a lot of time on the cemetery budget, when there's very little going on other than, the person's got a step increase and, and so forth. So I think, again, maybe the answer to that is to increase the relevance of the finance committee budget hearing.
Would there be a single finance committee meeting that you can envision that would cover most of everything that you cover in that meeting?
Yeah. Yeah, they basically would go through all the warrant articles, and in fact, they do that. But the problem is nobody shows up. Because remember, they got to print the book.
Right.
So they go through each of the articles one by one. The problem is most years it's a member of the Board of Selectmen, myself there, John Souza, and so forth. And it kind of just gets lost or not really appreciated, the role and recommendation of the Finance Committee. Because quite frankly, if the Finance Committee makes a statement at town meeting, I think it has a lot of weight.
One last question. Based on your observation of Chelmsford and other towns, it doesn't matter whether they're neighboring towns or any town in Massachusetts, how does our voluntary termination, in other words, people who say I quit, leaving the town employment compare with other towns?
I think we've had remarkable stability. When you look at, and the other thing, quite frankly, I think we got a remarkable number of Chelmsford residents in key positions in the community. Whether it's the finance director, the assessor, you just keep going down the line in terms of the positions inside the community, but you don't have turnover. I mean, you've got Gary Persichetti, who's been here since forever, almost 20 years, going back to the schools. You've got John Souza, again, 10 years in his current position, but even before that. Darlene Lucia, the town accountant, again, another generational employee of the town.
It would be my sense that our
Richard
turnover
Day,
is
40
very
plus
low,
years.
but that's your observation compared to what you're aware of in
Right.
other communities.
And I've been very conscious of whenever, all things being equal, of appointing a town resident into the community. And I think we've been well served by that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a comment about if I can get the words out. The information evening. I went for a number of years. I haven't been last year and this year. And I'll tell you why. Too many questions from the floor. And those same questions turn up at town meeting.
Right, the following week, yeah.
And if you streamlined it by just going through it, it'd be a lot better in my, at least in my case.
And we try. I mean, we basically say, look, this is not a mini-town meeting. We're not here to debate the issues. We're here to provide information, answer questions. But you're right, you often get into, mini debates over articles.
And you're right, if
it's
you
frustrating.
get 25 or 30% of the
Right.
reps, you get a lot.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen. Appreciate your input, and I'm sure we'll be contacting you more for more input as we continue our discussions. Mr. Diggs, are you going to give us any new information?
I'll just make a short summary.
Okay, a short summary.
I don't disagree with anything that the previous speaker said. It was a great resume and probably could be filled with even more great deeds. But I leave you with this one question. You had 5 members of the Board of Selectmen come here, 4 of which supported the idea of changing what the policy is. If we all went to a barbecue, we would all be standing in different places because we have no common thread among us other than wanting to do right by the town. So having everyone support the same idea, doesn't that say there's something there? Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Easy.
I think everybody who's here has spoken, so I think we can probably, unless somebody else wants to say something in addition, I think we can safely conclude that that's the end of our public input session, which has lasted almost 2.5 hours. So I guess, what does that mean? I finally got my wish after all these months of asking for public input and wondering where everybody is, and
It's been terrific.
nobody comes and nobody
finally
gives
showed
input,
up. Been
and
very
now we
good.
get 2.5 hours. So that falls into the category of be careful what you ask for, right?
You want a motion to adjourn?
What I would like to do is, I'd like to do one more thing if we can. Can we approve minutes?
Yep.
So I'll take a motion to approve minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of 4:25.
Second.
Okay, second, is there any discussion?
Is it important on page 2 to say the board voted, or should we add the Board of Selectmen voted? Or is it apparent from the, not being an English major,
Okay,
apparent from the previous sentence?
you're going a little too fast for me. Okay, the second page, right?
Second page, second line, second sentence, third sentence, I'm sorry.
The board voted to discuss them. Meaning what he said in updates. I guess that's what that means. So, I'm sorry, Dan, what was your, what do you
My
want?
question is, should, after the word board, should it say Board of Selectmen?
I think capital board gives reference to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, you've referred to it in the first sentence. I think
Yeah.
that's probably sufficient, and actually the second
All right.
section too.
What do I know?
Well,
Okay.
you very often have some good edits, so we like to hear from you. So the only thing I have is on the first page, the last paragraph. It says the committee discussed the upcoming meeting, ing.
Thank you.
Okay? It's the only thing I have. Anyone else?
With regards to the Section 8 removal, the question we had for town council, I don't want that to fall off the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I can give you, well, if you want to approve the minutes, and then I can give you an update, if you would like to have an update on that.
Or we could save it for next week, I just don't want to...
No, because it's very quickly, I can tell you. Okay, so is there any further discussion on the minutes? Okay, we've had a motion, it's been seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thank you.
Abstain.
2 abstentions, Dave and Sheila, who were not here, okay, during the last meeting. I'll give you a very quick update, and thank you for reminding me of that, because I had it on my notes to do. I did speak with town council on Section 8, and I think there was a bit of a disconnect between my communication with him and his communication back to me, and I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. What town council said the appropriate process for us to do is for us to go through Section 5, and we decide what we think should be carried forward or not, and then present that. He'll give us the review when he reviews the entire charter. He indicated he thought that there were certain sections of 8 that probably should be retained. But he said really the onus is on us to go through that and make those decisions. So we'll do that, okay?
Anything we can do to make the document shorter is a plus.
Well, he agrees that probably a lot of that can come out, but I guess I was trying to get him to, I guess maybe I was trying to shorten the process by getting him to tell us up front which sections we could do without, but he's not going to do that, so that's okay. So I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do you have to ask for a press question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Glad somebody's on the ball around here. Are there any questions from the press?
I think that was a lot of information to digest. I think I'm good for tonight, thank you.
I have 16 pages of notes.
Right, better you than me.
Okay, so no questions from the press. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. We're adjourned. It's going to take me 8 hours.
It's, I guess, that they don't